On AM News, and welcome. Professor, what's your take on the ANC's 2014 Election Manifesto launched by President Jacob Zuma on Saturday?
Look, there were many interesting things mentioned in there. And equally, there were many things that were mentioned that we heard before, and one suspect we would still hear more about them in the future. At the heart of what I'm saying is that perhaps it's not so much the manifesto per se, but what is going to be done with what is enshrined in the manifesto, implementation of what is being said. There are a few things that I find it particularly interesting and encouraging. One, the centralization of the tenderpreneurship. That has been a thorn issue for a long, long time. And the other thing is the youth wage tax. The introduction thereof, for me, is very encouraging. And then I think we have to see it being implemented and whatever the challenges, but let us not see us being a bit hesitant and reluctant to act with the necessary vim and spirit. But now, when it comes to another thing that I think they have done well on, and they should continue to work on, and as enshrined in the manifesto today, is also infrastructure development, because the economy can only succeed if it has got a viable infrastructure. And in that regard, I think it's encouraging, and one has to commend them and hope that indeed there will be commitment to implementation.
Absolutely, Professor. Now, the President also mentioned a radical economic transformation. Was in fact clear what this will entail? Professor?
I can hear you now, but previously I lost you altogether.
All right, Professor. I'm saying the President also mentioned a radical economic transformation. Was it clear what this will entail?
Well, yeah, again, remember, as head of state, he can only speak to the principles, and the foot soldiers will speak to the details. But I think the common sense would tell me that with the appropriate infrastructure, committed and concerted effort to improve on it and to avail it across the provinces, with the necessary amendments or attendant amendments as per the dictates of each province, I think you can hit the economy in an appropriate way. Two, I think there are challenges pertaining to the textile industry, challenges of labor in the mining industry, but all those challenges I think can be contended with, for as long as at least there is commitment and people act in unison, and where there are differences and we seek to resolve those within the limits of modesty and within the confines of the law. There will always be challenges, and the economy will never be the best we would hope for, but we can always do with what we have for a better tomorrow.
Yes, Professor. Now, you spoke about the youth wage subsidy. Now, President Zuma assured the labor sector that the youth wage subsidy would not lead to the mass retrenchment of older workers. Did it, in fact, manage to allay the fears of COSATU?
Look, in fact, more than that, I would say just the courage, the political courage, the political will to act in the face of opposition at times in the interest of the greater good, I think for me is commendable. Look, let's put it in this way. COSATU is opposed to that. They have their own reasons. But you can't deny that many youth are unemployed, and something has to be done in their interest. And indeed, this is one mechanism, one among many mechanisms that should be evolved to ensure that we help the situation. We cannot expect to have a stable society. We look forward to with confidence into the future when the youth, by far in their majority, are unhappy and they have no prospect for employment or for a better tomorrow.
All right. Now, Professor, President Jacob Zuma launched the Central Tender Board as an instrument to carry out the ANC's promised crackdown on corruption. Do you think the ANC-led government is capable of eradicating corruption?
Of all the things mentioned, this is one thing that I think is an innovation, because the rest is just a rehash of the previous 5 January 8 speeches, and obviously opening of parliament speeches. We have heard those before. But this one in particular, I'm more interested, and I want to believe the ANC is also learning and growing with time. Because if they are going to centralize the tender system, and then at the same time deploy cadres, right, into that into the panel, then forget it. And I'm saying it with cynicism, and I represent by far the majority of the people, because for the past 10, 15 years, people have been complaining about corruption. And we have heard the leadership denounce and renounce corruption. Yet, it's more rampant today than it was yesterday. So somebody must be honest enough and say, if we really want to win this, and to win the confidence of the populace, we have to deploy people regardless of their membership or affiliation to any political party, and based on merit, capability, and skills.
Professor, this manifesto, we keep talking about the manifesto, but what does it really mean for the ordinary South Africans, and how does it affect them in general?
Look, a manifesto is a blueprint, it's a guide, it's a statement of intent that if you at least elect me for the next 2 months or 12 years, I will do the following. And if you believe in me, give me a vote and I will do the same. So in the manifesto, I would say 80% of the statements in the manifesto, the promises, statements of intents, were there in the past 5 years. The question is, why don't we see enough action based on those? And then would the next statement come next year be different from this one? Okay? But I want to believe that the more people like me and others raise their voice as patriots, not as critics, we might see that we begin to deploy the appropriate people. We build sufficient state capacity to perform and deliver, and we ensure that we pause and take stock in the course of the mandate given, or in the course of the tenure of the mandate given.
And finally, Professor, with that mentioned, what should be the top priority of this manifesto? What should the ANC go out in terms of implementing this manifesto?
In education lies the future of any country. And education is power. Now, if we can get that one right, I can assure we'll go a long way. We are not denouncing the pass rate. We are saying, why is it that despite this discernible improvement, we don't seem to produce appropriate skills and technical capacity and capabilities to perform at the level other countries are doing. So let's look into that. That's number one. Number two, take care of the youth. In them lies the future of this country. And in them, we should invest so that we can derive dividends based on what they would be delivering then when they take charge and full responsibility for running the country, industry, and other aspects of our life.
Thank you so much, Professor, for talking to us. That was independent analyst, Professor Lesiba, for talking to us about the ANC's manifesto. Let's move on to